Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, and ask yourself this question: what's the worst possible circumstances in which to find yourself in a random battle in a destroyer? How about you find yourself on the ocean map with no islands to take cover behind, with 2 radar on the enemy team and a tier 10 carrier, while you're in a tier 9 destroyer like the USS Benham here? I mean, it could be worse. There could be 2 carriers on the enemy team, and you could be in a tier 8 destroyer with 3 radars on the enemy team. Or you could be in a French destroyer that doesn't have a smokescreen. So, yeah, it could always be worse, but you have to admit this is far from ideal. Akai Wolf here in the USS Benham appears to like a bit of the challenge, however. You'll notice that he has very intelligently turned his anti-aircraft guns off by pressing the P key right at the start of the battle. He's also divisioned up with a Friesland and a Des Moines, and that combination is going to be very useful, particularly because here come the enemy aircraft. Now, the carrier on his team is also proving to be very useful here because he's dropped fighters. Of course, the enemy carrier is doing exactly the same. I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that of the 3 caps available, the enemy carrier has zeroed straight in on the one that they're going for, but at least the friendly carrier has their back. And there go the fighters. The capture point up ahead, however, is definitely not clear. You might have noticed that Akai Wolf has the RPF skill indicated by the white hemisphere in the centre of the screen, pointing towards the location of the nearest enemy. The nearest enemy, and a couple of his friends, have just been spotted by the Hikuryu's attack planes, which is not good news for the carrier because the nearest enemy is a Cleveland. That's also not great news for Akai Wolf and his division because the Cleveland, of course, is a radar cruiser. The carrier's dropped more fighters while he attempts to get his rocket planes out of there, but all this is going to do is just feed more air kills to the Cleveland, because fighters have a comically low number of hit points. Luckily, well, not for the Erland over there, in the act of withdrawing his rocket attack planes, the Hikuryu has managed to spot another enemy destroyer, and you can see from the rapidly diminishing health bar of the Erland just exactly how dangerous it usually is for a destroyer when they get spotted from the air. Now, with his AA guns still turned off and he's still not spotted, Akai Wolf starts laying a smokescreen. Now, you might be thinking, well, he's not going slow enough to actually take advantage of that smokescreen, and you're absolutely right, but the smokescreen isn't for him. It's for his division in the Des Moines and the Friesland. The enemy midway sees the smokescreen on the edge of the cap circle, thinks, haha, a destroyer for lunch. Well, he's not wrong. There is a destroyer inside the smokescreen. A destroyer with very good AA, the Friesland, but it's not the destroyer that just wiped out that entire rocket attack plane squadron. It's the Des Moines that's also hiding inside that smokescreen, which probably came as a very rude surprise to the captain of the enemy midway. Akai Wolf, of course, staying outside of the smokescreen in order to provide spotting so the Des Moines doesn't have to use his radar, and also popping his hydro, just in case there are any torpedoes on the way from the enemy Udaloy. The enemy Cleveland has now popped his radar, which I suppose is to be expected given that there is a smokescreen inside of the cap circle, and unfortunately clocked Akai Wolf here in the Benham, who has a couple of hairy moments here as he briefly comes under fire from the majority of the enemy ships that are capable of shooting at him, but that of course just means that they're going to continue to be spotted after firing. Akai Wolf is no longer detected, and his friends inside the smokescreen, because of course it's an American smokescreen, so it's big and it lasts forever, are able to continue shooting at all of those spotted enemy ships with impunity. Now that the enemy Cleveland's radar has expired, meanwhile, Akai Wolf probing the central cap here, looking for an opportunity to contest it, while at the same time flooding the ocean with torpedoes, because this of course is the Benham's party trick. It has 4 torpedo launchers, each with 4 tubes, 2 of them on each side, which means that the Benham is capable of putting 16 torpedoes in the water at once. And with the range and speed on the torpedoes and the quick reload, you can actually have the second set of 16 torpedoes in the water before the first set of 16 torpedoes have reached the limit of their range. So, yep, 32 torpedoes in the water at the same time. You might be thinking to yourself, what's the point of the Shimakaze? That's a very good question. It's true that the Shimakaze has better stealth than the Benham, but the Benham's stealth is pretty damn good. Oh, and there's the first of what I'm sure are going to be many torpedo hits. But yeah, 5.9 kilometer stealth is certainly not bad. And while it's also true that the Shimakaze's torpedoes individually do hit a lot harder, it simply can't compete with the volume of torpedoes that the Benham is capable of putting into the water at once. And also, while the Benham's AA is weak by American standards, it's still better than that of the Shimakaze, which of course is why Akai Wolf is the one cruising around outside of the safety of the smokescreen with his AA turned off, and the Friesland and the Des Moines were the ones sitting inside the smokescreen shredding enemy aircraft and raining down death and destruction on nearby enemy ships. Well, the Des Moines isn't anymore, he got turpits a couple of minutes ago. But you get the idea. And also, the Benham's a tier lower than the Shimakaze, and it's only 2.5 knots slower. So, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Oh yes, that's it. Power creep. Of course, there's also the fact that having... Oh, more torpedo hits. Yeah. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. They will learn that smoke screens are torpedo magnets, or they won't learn and they'll just keep dying to torpedoes while they're loitering around inside smoke screens. But yes, great concealment. I mean, is a good thing, but it can often work against you. Particularly for Shimakaze captains. I mean, what's that French Tier 10 destroyer with a terrible concealment? The Kleber. And while we're on the subject, the Russian Tier 10, or one of the Russian Tier 10s anyway, the Khabarovsk. Both of them have utterly diabolically bad concealment. So if you get surface spotted in one of those ships, it's either because you're shooting at something, which is fine because you're probably 12 kilometers away and you're going to be very difficult to hit because you're incredibly fast, or it's because you've blundered inside surface detection range, which is also probably going to be fine because thanks to your terrible concealment you're still most likely going to be around 9 kilometers away, which is far enough for you to also avoid most of the incoming fire. But if a Shimakaze gets surface spotted, it's definitely not going to be because he's been firing his guns. Because the guns on Japanese torpedo destroyers up until the Shimakaze are so horribly bad that most Japanese torpedo destroyer captains have just been conditioned into never using them. And oh wow, he actually managed to torpedo the Friesland. I mean, it looked like he was safe. He was sailing away. The torpedoes were going to pass either side. I was sure that he'd seen them, but I guess not. He must have turned into one of them. Well, we'll take it. Oh, it looks like the Bismarck caught one as well, which knocked his steering out and caused flooding. So everybody's going to be zeroing in on the Bismarck now. Yep, there it goes. Looks like the Kuryu's closing in with the torpedo bombers. Unfortunately, the Montana up ahead is ridiculously overcommitted, and the Bismarck does manage to take him out. But this is something that you would rarely, if ever, see a Shimakaze player doing, shooting at a low-health battleship, when the Shimakaze's guns are actually not that bad. But Japanese torpedo destroyers have been conditioned for so long by not having good guns that most Shimakaze captains can probably be forgiven for never even thinking of using them. So if a Shimakaze captain gets surface spotted, it's usually because they've actually blundered to within 5.5 kilometers of an enemy surface ship, and you're now 5.5 kilometers away from an enemy surface ship. And that's an extremely unhealthy place to be for a destroyer. So great stealth isn't always that great. It can often work against you, particularly if the great stealth doesn't also come with great situational awareness. You know, I actually think that Ocean, while it's certainly not a popular map, although Wargaming do keep it in the rotation, just with lower weight in the rotation than other maps, you don't see Ocean very often. And while Wargaming have acknowledged that this is not the most popular map in the game, they're keeping it in because, well, it's different. But I do think that it's actually probably one of the better maps in which to play a Japanese torpedo destroyer. Because there are no islands that can surprise you by having concealed Clevelands lurking around the other side. So, you know, if your situational awareness is particularly shit and you are in a Japanese torpedo destroyer, there are less surprises. There are less ways for your extremely good stealth to actually bite you in the arse if you're playing on Ocean. I realise that's not much of a consolation for anybody who isn't in something like a Shimakaze when this map, infrequently as it does, appears in the map rotation, but, well, what can I say? You got to take the rough with the smooth. By the way, can I just point out that Erland over there hasn't actually been radared? He was surface spotted because he started shooting at a Chapayev. The Chapayev didn't need to radar it. You know, if they ever come down to write down the history of the world's best bad decisions, shooting at a Chapayev when you're in Ireland is probably going to be somewhere in the top 10. I mean, it's one thing shooting at something like a Chapayev, which by the way has 152mm guns with a muzzle velocity not far short of 1,000 meters per second. But if you're shooting at a Chapayev in something like a Kleber or a Khabarovsk, which theoretically, with the right upgrades and commander skills, can be shooting at you from a range of 14 to 16 kilometers, and are likely to be zipping around at speeds in excess of 45 knots, so even with the railgun-like muzzle velocity on the Chapayev's guns, they're still going to be difficult to hit. Ooh, more torpedoes. That's nice. And there's another kill, which leaves this cap circle wide open, by the way. But an Erland shooting at a Chapayev with the shit range on the pan-European destroyer's guns is probably never going to be more than 10 kilometers away, and isn't that fast. So I think that's what they call suicide by Chapayev. Well, anyway, as mentioned, with the death of the Erland, or the suicide of the Erland, and the death of the Baija, is that how you pronounce it? The Pan-Asian Tier 9 Premiumissimo clone, that has left this southern cap circle wide open, with only a Venetia in a position to offer any kind of resistance. Now, don't get me wrong, the Venetia is a very, very good Tier 10 cruiser. There's a reason why you see it as an almost exclusive pick in competitive Tier 10 battles. If you look at the clan battles current season, for example, you can pretty much expect to see 3 Venetias on each side. But it pays a price for its firepower. It has no utility. There's no radar, and there's no hydro. And he has to know, because Akai Wolf was spotted, that there's a Benham down here. So what I'd like to see that Venetia doing is to just get the fuck out of here. I mean, I'm absolutely positive that Akai Wolf would love nothing more than that Venetia for to come down here and try to contest the cap circle that Akai Wolf has just started flipping, because that would be absolute suicide. Question is, how stupid is the Venetia? And the answer appears to be, not very. He's not taken the bait at all. It's almost as if he knows that there's a Friesland inside that smokescreen, so he doesn't have to be worried about any torpedoes. I mean, if he turns south and attempts to contest this cap, he is going to get torpedoed to death, and he certainly seems to know that. The Friesland has hydro, doesn't it? I think it does. That would explain the torpedoes being spotted over there. Question is, who launched them? Oh, yes, of course, the Udaloy. Is he still alive? He was like the first enemy destroyer spotted. Yeah, you see, the benefit of not having great stealth in the first place just means that you stay the fuck away from anything that has the potential to kill you. Now, this could go either way. Oh, no, they've both been spotted. Ooh, that's not good. It's not good for the Friesland. And, well, they managed to kill each other, so I'd call that a fair trade. I mean, the Udaloy had a lot more health than the Friesland when that engagement began, so that wasn't a terrible trade on behalf of the Friesland. 2 on... No, I spoke too soon. The only enemy ship left is now the Venetia. And he is in all kinds of trouble here, because he's fighting a destroyer that he's never going to spot. With torpedoes, they're going to be extremely difficult for him to detect because he doesn't have hydro, and he's constantly going to be spotted, if not by the Benham here, then by the enemy aircraft. The situation isn't entirely in Akai Wolf's favour here, of course. I mean, it mostly is, but, well, his torpedoes have a base range, I think, of 10.5 kilometres, and his speed is exactly the same, 36.5 knots, as the Venetia. So it should be very difficult for him to catch up with him if the Venetia was steaming directly away from him. And that would mean that the effective range of his torpedoes, and by that I mean how close he would have to get to the Venetia to launch the torpedoes and give them time to catch up to and hit the Venetia if he was sailing away from him, would be significantly shorter than the actual range of the torpedoes, which is 10.5 kilometres. But the Venetia is not sailing away from him. And you can kind of understand why, because while the Venetia does have the points lead, it's not much of a points lead, and if he just runs away from Akai Wolf, which he could do, he could probably weather the storm from the carrier. But Akai Wolf would then just sweep in, take the final cap, and with the amount of time remaining in the match, the Venetia would lose 2 points. So he stopped to try to flip Bravo. And you can understand why, because maybe now he can run out the clock, but unfortunately the time that he spent sitting in the cap circle has allowed Akai Wolf to get some very effective torpedoes off. Which of course, because he has no hydro, the Venetia didn't see until it was far too late. It's kind of ironic in a way that while the Venetia is arguably the most dangerous cruiser in the game, as far as destroyers are concerned, thanks to its semi-armor piercing shells, but it has none of the tools that it actually needs to locate those destroyers in order to dish that damage out to them. He's popped his smoke screen because he knows what's coming next. You're going to get shot at when you're on that kind of low health, and of course because he's inside the smoke screen you can't see what's shooting at you, and if you start shooting when you're in a cruiser with guns as big as that, you are going to get spotted and killed. Like I said, it's difficult to be too critical of the captain of the Venetia there. There was very little that he could do under those circumstances. And while that was certainly not any kind of damage or kill record from Akai Wolf, I think it was a fairly textbook example of how to play the Benham to its strengths. It's just a shame that we couldn't have seen that battle from the perspective of his teammate in the Friesland, who actually managed to get a better result with nearly 3,000 base experience. But hey, I can only make do with what I've got. Anyway, very well played, Akai Wolf. Congratulations on the result. Thank you very much for sending that one in. Everyone else, hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.